Before we get into the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. Claire Bennett's hands trembled slightly as she set down the container of baby formula on the customer service counter at Morrison's grocery, the fluorescent lights overhead making everything feel harsh and exposed. The price tag read $47.99, a sum that represented the difference between keeping the electricity on for another week or feeding her 9-month-old daughter, Emma, the premium formula the pediatrician had insisted she needed due to the baby's sensitive stomach. "I'm sorry," Claire said quietly to the teenage clerk whose name tag read Brandon. "I need to return this. I have the receipt. It's unopened." Brandon barely looked up from his phone. "Store policy says no returns on baby formula. Health regulations or whatever." Claire felt heat rising to her cheeks. She was aware of the line forming behind her, could feel the weight of impatient stares on her back. "Please, I just bought it 20 minutes ago. My daughter's doctor said she actually needs a different kind. The container is sealed, completely unused. Lady, I don't make the rules." Brandon's tone held that particular brand of indifference that comes from minimum wage employment and teenage invincibility. "You'll have to take it up with the manager, but she's on lunch for another hour." Behind her, someone sighed dramatically. Claire blinked back tears, exhausted from another sleepless night with Emma, who'd been colicky since birth. 6 months ago, Claire had been living a different life entirely, married to Marcus Bennett, a corporate attorney whose charm had masked a calculating coldness she'd been too young and naive to recognize. When she'd gotten pregnant unexpectedly, Marcus had presented her with divorce papers and a check for $50,000, insisting she sign a document relinquishing any future claims to his income or assets. "Consider it a generous settlement," he'd said in the same tone he might use to close a business deal. "You'll be fine." She hadn't been fine. The money had evaporated faster than she'd imagined possible, consumed by medical bills from a complicated pregnancy, the security deposit on a tiny Brooklyn apartment, and the mounting costs of single parenthood that no one warns you about. She'd stretched every dollar until they screamed, but here she was, 8 months later, unable to afford $47.99 worth of formula because she'd already miscalculated which kind Emma needed. "Ma'am." "You're holding up the line," Brandon said, his teenage arrogance making her feel ancient at 28. "I understand that. But, is there a problem here?" A deep voice came from beside her, cultured and calm, carrying the kind of authority that made Brandon straighten immediately. Claire turned to find a man in an impeccably tailored navy suit, though he'd loosened his tie and rolled his sleeves to his forearms. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that showed threads of silver at the temples, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of winter steel. There was something familiar about him, though Claire couldn't place it. "Sir, this is between me and the customer," Brandon attempted, but his voice cracked slightly. The man ignored him, his attention focusing entirely on Claire with an intensity that made her simultaneously self-conscious and strangely seen. "What seems to be the issue?" Claire hesitated, pride warring with desperation. "I bought the wrong formula for my daughter. I'm trying to return it, but apparently that's against store policy, even though I purchased it less than half an hour ago and it's completely sealed." He glanced at the container, then at Brandon. "Get your manager. Now." There was something in his tone that Brandon couldn't argue with. He scurried away, leaving Claire alone with this stranger whose presence seemed to command the space around him. "You didn't have to do that," Claire said quietly. "I don't need anyone fighting my battles." A slight smile touched his lips, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because that policy is absurd and contradicts consumer protection laws in New York State. Sealed, non-perishable items purchased within 30 days are returnable regardless of category." Claire blinked. How do you know that? I'm a lawyer. He paused, then extended his hand. Ethan Cole. The name hit her like ice water. Ethan Cole. Marcus's former law school classmate. The man her ex-husband had mentioned exactly once, with an edge of bitterness that Claire had never fully understood. We started at the same firm, Marcus had said during one of their early dates. But Cole always had to be the golden boy. Couldn't stand anyone else succeeding. She'd seen photos of Ethan Cole in business publications over the years, usually accompanying articles about his meteoric rise in corporate law and his recent transition into venture capital. He was reportedly worth somewhere north of $800 million, a self-made success story that stood in stark contrast to Marcus's family money and connections. Claire Bennett, she said, shaking his hand despite her instinct to flee. His grip was firm, warm, and she released it quickly. I think you know my ex-husband, Marcus Bennett. Something flickered in Ethan's expression, gone too quickly to read. I do. How is Marcus? I wouldn't know. We've been divorced for 8 months. She wasn't sure why she volunteered that information. Before Ethan could respond, the manager appeared, a harried woman in her 50s, who took one look at Ethan and seemed to recognize him. Mr. Cole, I didn't realize you were here. Is there a problem? Miss Bennett needs to exchange this formula for the correct type. I trust that won't be an issue? The manager's professional smile never wavered. Of course not. Brandon. Process the exchange immediately and add a 20% discount for the inconvenience. Claire wanted to protest the discount, but Ethan's presence seemed to have created an invisible force field around the transaction. Within minutes, she had the correct formula, plus the unexpected discount that meant she could also afford the box of diapers she'd been putting off purchasing. Thank you, she said as they walked toward the exit together, though she wasn't entirely comfortable with the help. You didn't have to intervene, but I appreciate it. You're Marcus's ex-wife. Ethan's tone was carefully neutral as they stepped into the weak October sunlight. That's interesting. Claire bristled slightly. Is it? Or are you just cataloging information about your law school rival's failures? His eyebrows rose. Is that what he told you? That we're rivals? Aren't you? Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying her with that same unsettling intensity. Marcus and I had different philosophies about how to practice law and how to treat people. That made us incompatible colleagues, not rivals. I don't waste energy on rivalries, Miss Bennett. Life's too short. Something in his tone made her reconsider her preconceptions. I apologize. That was unfair. Marcus's perspective isn't exactly unbiased. Few people's are. He paused by a black Tesla parked illegally in a loading zone. Where are you parked? I'll walk you to your car. I took the subway. Claire clutched her shopping bag a little tighter. My apartment's about 4 blocks from here. With a 9-month-old? Emma's with a neighbor right now. Mrs. Chen watches her when I need to run errands. I can't exactly afford a babysitter. The words came out more defensive than she'd intended, revealing the raw edge of her pride. She'd been raised by parents who valued independence and self-sufficiency above almost everything else. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat. Ethan's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I didn't mean to imply judgment. Let me give you a ride home. It's starting to rain. Claire glanced up at the darkening sky, feeling the first drops of what promised to be a downpour. Her practical side warred with her wariness of accepting favors, especially from someone connected to Marcus. I don't, Miss Bennett. It's just a ride. I promise I'm not going to interrogate you about your marriage or use this as an opportunity to gather intelligence for some imagined corporate warfare with your ex-husband. His slight smile took the edge off the words. Sometimes, a ride is just a ride. Against her better judgment, Claire found herself nodding. The Tesla's interior was exactly what she'd expected. Pristine leather, subtle technology, and the faint scent of expensive cologne. As Ethan pulled smoothly into traffic, she found herself studying his profile. The strong jaw, the slight tension around his eyes that suggested he carried burdens despite his success. "How long were you married?" he asked after a few blocks. 2 years. Together for 3 before that. Claire surprised herself by answering honestly. "We met when I was 23, fresh out of college and working as a paralegal at his firm." Classic story. Junior associate sweeps naive young employee off her feet with expensive dinners and promises of a perfect life. But it wasn't perfect. Marcus was more interested in the idea of a wife than an actual partner. Someone to look good at firm functions, to run his household efficiently, to not ask too many questions about his late nights at the office. Claire stopped, unsure why she was confiding in this stranger. "Sorry, you didn't ask for my life story. I asked how long you were married." "You're answering honestly." Ethan glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the rain-slicked streets. "I appreciate honesty. What about you?" The question escaped before Claire could stop it. "Married? Divorced? Chronically single billionaire?" He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious face. "Chronically single, though I'm not technically a billionaire. Yet. And it's by choice, mostly. My work doesn't leave much room for relationships. That's what Marcus always said." Claire heard the bitterness in her voice. Turned out his work involved a paralegal named Stephanie, who was significantly younger and more accommodating than I was. "I'm sorry." Ethan's words carried unexpected weight. Marcus always did have a talent for justifying his worst impulses as professional necessities. There was history in that statement, stories Claire suddenly wanted to know. "You really didn't like him, did you?" "I didn't respect him." "There's a difference." Ethan pulled up in front of her apartment building, a converted brownstone that had seen better decades. Marcus always took shortcuts, used people as stepping stones. In law school, he'd steal research from classmates, then present it as his own. At the firm, he built his reputation on associates' work while ensuring they got none of the credit. Claire absorbed this, recognizing the man Ethan described even as she grappled with how completely she'd misread Marcus during their courtship. Why didn't anyone call him out? People did. Marcus was just better at politics than ethics. He came from money, had connections, knew how to position himself as indispensable to the right partners. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I left the firm partly because I couldn't stomach working in that environment anymore. And now you're a venture capitalist worth nearly $1 billion. Claire smiled slightly. "I'd say it worked out for you. Money isn't everything, Miss Bennett," says someone who has enough of it to pay $47.99 for formula without checking their bank balance first. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Ethan didn't flinch. "You're right. I apologize for the platitude. Money absolutely matters, especially when you don't have enough of it." He reached into his wallet, producing a business card. "If you ever need legal advice regarding your divorce settlement or anything else, call me. No charge." Claire stared at the embossed card. "Why would you help me?" "Because Marcus took advantage of you, and I suspect your settlement was grossly inadequate considering his income." Ethan's expression hardened. "And because I don't like seeing people struggle while he enjoys the fruits of labor that should have been shared." Claire sat in her tiny apartment that evening, Emma finally asleep after an hour of fussy crying, and studied Ethan Cole's business card under the dim lamp light. The address was in Midtown, one of those glass towers where a single month's rent probably exceeded her annual income. She should throw the card away, forget the entire strange encounter, and continue managing on her own as she'd been doing. Instead, she found herself researching him online. Ethan Cole, 36, had indeed left Marcus's old firm 7 years ago to start his own venture capital company, focusing on tech startups with social impact. His portfolio included companies working on affordable housing technology, educational software for underserved communities, and sustainable energy solutions. Articles described him as brilliant but difficult, demanding but fair, someone who genuinely seemed to care about using capital to create positive change. There were photos of him at charity galas, always alone despite being linked romantically to various socialites and entrepreneurs over the years. Nothing ever seemed to stick. One profile piece quoted him saying, "I watched my father work himself to death, chasing wealth that meant nothing when he couldn't be there for my mother's final years. I don't intend to repeat his mistakes." Claire's phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Emma was an angel today. Don't worry about paying me back for watching her. You help me with my English, I help you with the baby. That's what neighbors do." Tears pricked Claire's eyes. Mrs. Chen was 73, lived on a fixed income, and insisted on watching Emma for free several times a week despite Claire's protests. The kindness of near strangers had sustained Claire through these impossible months in ways that Marcus's check never could. Her phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. Her breath caught when she saw the sender, Marcus Bennett. "Claire, I've been informed that you've been speaking to Ethan Cole. I'm sure he's filled your head with all sorts of lies about me. Just remember who supported you for 5 years and gave you a very generous settlement when our marriage ended. Don't let bitter rivals manipulate you into making poor decisions. You're smarter than that. Marcus." Claire reread the message 3 times, anger building with each pass. How did Marcus even know about her encounter with Ethan? And since when did he care who she spoke to? They'd barely communicated since the divorce beyond logistics regarding paperwork. She glanced at Ethan's business card again, then at Emma sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. The baby had Marcus's dark hair but Claire's green eyes, a genetic compromise that somehow felt symbolic. Emma deserved more than Claire's current hand-to-mouth existence. She deserved opportunities, security, a mother who wasn't constantly stressed about money. Before she could second-guess herself, Claire drafted an email to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, thank you again for your help today. I'd like to take you up on your offer to review my divorce settlement, but I can't afford legal fees right now. If you're serious about pro bono representation, I'm available to meet at your convenience. Also, my ex-husband somehow knows we spoke. Is that normal? Claire Bennett." She hit send before courage failed her, then sat in the darkness listening to Emma's soft breathing, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step toward reclaiming her life. The response came within 10 minutes. "Miss Bennett, I'm serious about the offer. My assistant will contact you tomorrow to schedule a meeting. And no, it's not normal for your ex-husband to be monitoring your interactions unless he's having you followed, which would be both creepy and potentially illegal. We should discuss that, too. See you soon. Ethan." Having you followed. The words sent a chill through Claire. Was Marcus really that concerned about her talking to his old law school colleague? What exactly was he afraid she might discover? 3 days later, Claire sat in a conference room on the 47th floor of Cole Ventures, feeling desperately out of place in her best interview suit, which was 4 years old and slightly too tight after pregnancy. Ethan's assistant, an efficient woman named Patricia, who radiated competence, had provided coffee and assured her that Mr. Cole would be right in. The view from the windows was staggering, all of Manhattan spread out like a glittering promise. Claire tried not to calculate how many months of her rent could be covered by a single piece of furniture in this room. Sorry for the delay. Ethan entered, looking crisp in a charcoal suit, though he immediately shed the jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Claire was beginning to recognize this as a habit, as if he couldn't stand the constraints of formal business attire. Client call ran long. "Have you been offered coffee?" "Yes, thank you." Claire clutched her folder containing the divorce documents she'd brought. "I appreciate you meeting with me, Mr. Cole. Ethan, please. We're going to be working together." Formality seems unnecessary. He sat across from her, rather than behind the imposing desk, creating an unexpected intimacy. "Let's start with the basics. Tell me about your marriage to Marcus and how it ended." Over the next hour, Claire detailed everything she'd been too embarrassed to tell anyone else. How Marcus had grown increasingly distant during her pregnancy. How he'd blamed her morning sickness for disrupting his sleep. How he'd presented divorce papers 3 weeks after Emma's birth, claiming he'd made a mistake marrying someone so incompatible with his lifestyle. The $50,000 settlement that had seemed generous until she realized it barely covered 6 months of expenses with a newborn. Ethan listened without interruption, his expression growing progressively darker. When she finished, he sat back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Your settlement was grossly inadequate," he said finally. "In New York, you're entitled to a portion of marital assets, child support calculated based on Marcus's actual income, which I'm guessing was significantly misrepresented in the paperwork, and potentially spousal maintenance given the length of your marriage and the fact that you left your job at his request." Claire felt dizzy. "But I signed a settlement agreement. Marcus's lawyer said it was fair, that I was lucky to get anything since the marriage was so short." Marcus's lawyer lied. Or at a minimum, severely misrepresented the situation. Ethan pulled out a legal pad. "Did you have your own attorney review the settlement before you signed?" Marcus said it would be adversarial to bring in lawyers, that we should keep things amicable. Claire's voice was small. He made it seem like I was being difficult by even asking questions. Classic manipulation tactic. Ethan's voice was gentle, but firm. "Claire, I need to ask you some hard questions. Was there any coercion involved in getting you to sign? Did Marcus threaten you?" "Not physically, but he implied that if I fought him, he'd make sure I got nothing, that his family had connections and I was nobody from nowhere, that I should be grateful he was being so generous, considering I'd trapped him with a pregnancy." The words hung in the air. Claire had never said them aloud before, had barely admitted to herself how emotionally abusive Marcus had been during those final months. Shame washed over her, hot and acidic. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's textual economic coercion. Your settlement agreement is likely voidable, especially since you signed under duress within weeks of giving birth, which any judge would recognize as a period of extreme vulnerability. So what does that mean?" "It means we can reopen your case and pursue what you're actually entitled to." Ethan leaned forward. "But I need you to understand something. Marcus will fight this. He'll use every resource at his disposal, and he has significant resources. This won't be easy or quick." Claire thought of Emma, of the formula incident, of Mrs. Chen's kindness, and the stack of unpaid bills on her kitchen counter. What am I actually entitled to? Ethan pulled up a calculator on his tablet. Conservatively, Marcus's income as a senior associate was around $350,000 annually when you divorced. Child support alone should be approximately $2,900 monthly. You're also entitled to a portion of assets accumulated during the marriage, his 401k contributions, any bonuses, possibly even a stake in his partnership track value. Claire couldn't breathe. $2,900 monthly. That was more than her current total income from the part-time remote work she'd cobbled together. "Why would you do this for free?" she asked. "There must be dozens of people who need legal help." "Why me?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Because I've watched Marcus Bennett get away with using people for 15 years. Because I believe in accountability. And because..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I know what it's like to watch someone you care about suffer because they didn't have adequate resources or representation." "Your mother," Claire said, remembering the profile piece she'd read. The article said your father was never around, that your mother struggled. My father was a workaholic who provided financially but was absent emotionally. When my mother was diagnosed with cancer, he was too busy with a major deal to even visit her in the hospital regularly. She died without proper care because he'd been so focused on building wealth that he'd neglected to ensure she had comprehensive health insurance. Ethan's voice was steady, but Claire saw the pain beneath. I was 23, fresh out of law school, and completely helpless. That's when I realized that money and power matter, but only if you use them to protect people who can't protect themselves. Claire felt something shift in her understanding of this complicated man. I'm sorry about your mother. Thank you. The point is, I made a promise to her that I'd use whatever success I achieved to help others. This is me keeping that promise. Before Claire could respond, Patricia knocked and entered. Mr. Cole, Marcus Bennett is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting he needs to speak with you immediately. Something about unethical solicitation of his ex-wife. Ethan's expression turned to ice. Tell Mr. Bennett that I'm in a meeting with a client and cannot be disturbed. If he'd like to schedule an appointment, he can call next week. He says he'll wait. Claire stood abruptly. Maybe I should go. I don't want to cause problems. Sit down. Ethan's tone was authoritative but not unkind. You're not causing problems. Marcus is, and he's about to learn that intimidation tactics don't work on me. He turned to Patricia. Actually, send him in. Let's clear the air now. Claire's heart hammered as Patricia left. Ethan, I don't think, trust me. He said quietly. Marcus is a bully, and bullies back down when confronted. The door opened, and Marcus strode in, every inch the successful attorney in his bespoke suit. He'd always been handsome in a conventional way, square jaw, perfect teeth, carefully styled hair, but next to Ethan's rougher, more genuine presence, Marcus looked like a polished facade. Claire. Marcus's voice dripped with false concern. I've been worried about you. Patricia said you were in a meeting. I had no idea it was with you. The lie was transparent. Of course he'd known. That's why he was here. Hello, Marcus. Claire was proud that her voice didn't shake. What do you want? Marcus ignored her, focusing on Ethan. Cole, we need to discuss your highly unethical behavior. Soliciting my ex-wife as a client when you know we have history. I didn't solicit anyone, Ethan interrupted calmly. Miss Bennett contacted me requesting a review of what appears to be a grossly inadequate divorce settlement obtained through coercion and misrepresentation. I agreed because it's the right thing to do. Claire, he's manipulating you. Marcus finally looked at her, his expression a practiced blend of concern and condescension. Ethan has hated me since law school. He's using you to get back at me. Is he? Claire heard herself say. Or are you afraid I'm going to discover how badly you screwed me over? Marcus's mask slipped slightly. Watch your tone. I gave you $50,000. You gave her a pittance while walking away from all financial responsibility for your daughter. Ethan stood, his presence suddenly filling the room. Let's be clear about what's happening here, Marcus. You coerced your ex-wife into signing an unconscionable settlement agreement while she was postpartum, vulnerable, and without proper legal representation. That's not generosity. That's exploitation. I provided for her during our marriage. You provided for yourself. Claire interrupted, finding her voice. She stood as well, refusing to be the smallest person in the room anymore. I gave up my career at your request. I managed your home, attended your firm functions, played the perfect corporate wife. And the moment I became inconvenient, you discarded me with a check and some legal documents I was too exhausted to properly understand. Marcus's face flushed. Claire, you're being emotional, don't. The word came out sharp. Don't tell me I'm emotional for being angry about being manipulated. That's what you always did. gaslight me into thinking my reasonable reactions were overreactions. Something like panic flickered in Marcus's eyes. He turned back to Ethan. You can't possibly think you'll win if this goes to court. My firm has resources. So do I, Ethan said mildly. And unlike you, Marcus, I'm not afraid of discovery. I'm actually looking forward to subpoenaing your financial records, deposing your colleagues about your actual income and partnership status, and revealing to a judge exactly how you strong-armed a new mother into accepting a settlement that wouldn't cover a year's worth of childcare. The silence that followed was electric. Claire watched Marcus calculate, saw him realize that his usual intimidation tactics weren't working. Claire, think about Emma. Marcus's voice took on a pleading quality. Do you really want to drag our daughter through a contentious court battle? Think about how this will affect her. The manipulation was so transparent that Claire almost laughed. Emma is 9 months old, Marcus. She won't remember any court proceedings. But she will remember growing up in poverty because her father refused to provide adequate support. She'll remember her mother struggling to afford formula while her father drives a Porsche and takes vacations to the Hamptons. How do you? Marcus stopped himself, but too late. How do I know about the Porsche and the Hamptons house? Claire felt a cold clarity settle over her. Because you post about them constantly on social media, Marcus. You're not exactly discreet about your lifestyle. Ethan's slight smile suggested he'd already compiled this evidence. Here's how this is going to work, Marcus. You're going to leave now. In 3 business days, you'll receive a formal letter outlining the inadequacies in the original settlement and proposing mediation. You have 2 options: negotiate in good faith or prepare for litigation that will be both expensive and embarrassing. You can't. I can, and I will. Ethan's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I'd also recommend you stop having Claire followed. That's harassment and potentially stalking, both of which are criminal offenses in New York. Marcus's face went white. I haven't. Patricia has the name of the private investigator you hired. We've already spoken to him. He's been very cooperative. Ethan's expression was unreadable. Leave now, Marcus, before I decide to add that to our legal filings. After Marcus stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, Claire sank back into her chair, adrenaline leaving her shaky. You okay? Ethan asked gently, returning to his seat. I stood up to him. Claire's voice was wondering. I've never done that before. He always made me feel so small. You're not small. You never were. You just needed to remember that. Ethan slid a bottle of water across the table. Drink. Confrontation is dehydrating. Claire laughed, surprised by the mundane observation. Is that legal advice? Life advice. Learned it from years of contentious negotiations. His expression softened. You did well, Claire. Most people fold when confronted by their abuser. Is that what Marcus is? An abuser? Emotional and economic abuse, yes. I know those terms get thrown around loosely, but what you described, the isolation, the financial control, the gaslighting, those are textbook patterns. Claire absorbed this, pieces of her marriage clicking into place. I thought I was just weak, that I should have been stronger. Abuse works, because abusers are experts at making victims believe they're the problem. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes intense. You're not weak, Claire. You survived. You're raising your daughter. You're rebuilding. That takes incredible strength. The sincerity in his voice made tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back, unwilling to cry in front of this man who'd already seen too much of her vulnerability. So what happens now? She asked. Now we build your case. I'll need complete financial records from your marriage, communication logs with Marcus, documentation of your current expenses. Patricia will help you gather everything. Ethan pulled out his phone, typing quickly. I'm also going to recommend you document any contact Marcus attempts. If he's been having you followed, he's not going to take this lying down. You really think he'll fight? I know he will. Marcus's entire identity is built on control and winning. You challenging his authority threatens that. He'll try to intimidate you, guilt you, maybe even offer a slightly better settlement to avoid court. Ethan met her eyes. When that happens, and it will, I need you to remember that you deserve full compensation. Not charity. Not a favor. Your legal entitlement. Claire nodded, trying to internalize the concept. For so long she'd been grateful for crumbs that she'd forgotten what it felt like to expect a full meal. Can I ask you something personal? She ventured. Sure. Why do you really hate Marcus? The research theft and credit stealing doesn't seem like enough to explain this level of animosity. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, he said, Marcus didn't just steal research in law school. He stole the work that was supposed to be my ticket to a federal clerkship. I'd spent 2 years on an original analysis of corporate liability structures. Marcus got access to my drafts through a study group, copied the framework, and submitted it to a prestigious journal under his name. When I tried to prove it was my work, he produced preliminary notes that predated mine. Notes I later discovered he'd fabricated using document metadata manipulation. Claire felt sick. He destroyed your opportunity. He tried to. The journal eventually discovered the plagiarism, but by then, the clerkship had gone to someone else. My reputation was damaged by the controversy, even though I was the victim. Ethan's voice was level, but she could hear the old wound beneath. Marcus faced no real consequences because his father was a major donor to the law school. He graduated with honors while I graduated under a cloud of suspicion. But you still succeeded. More than he did. Yes, because I was too angry to quit. I rebuilt my reputation brick by brick, took cases nobody else wanted, worked 100-hour weeks to prove myself. Ethan looked at her directly. That chip on my shoulder became my greatest asset. It made me relentless. And now, you're using that relentlessness for me. Consider it poetic justice. His slight smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Marcus has gotten away with using people for too long. It's time someone held him accountable. Claire studied him, this complicated man who'd walked into her life by accident and was now offering to turn it upside down. What if we lose? What if the court doesn't see it the way you do? Then, you'll be in the same position you're in now, except you'll have fought for something better. There's dignity in that. Ethan's expression gentled. But we won't lose, Claire. I'm very good at what I do, and your case is strong. Over the next few weeks, Claire's life transformed in ways both exhilarating and terrifying. Ethan assigned a junior attorney from his firm to help her compile evidence, a sharp young woman named Rachel, who treated Claire's case with the same seriousness she'd give a multi-million-dollar corporate negotiation. They documented everything: Marcus's actual income, the timing of the divorce relative to Emma's birth, the lack of independent legal counsel, the coercive language in Marcus's emails during the separation. The more Claire reviewed her own history, the angrier she became. Not just at Marcus, but at herself for accepting so little, for believing his narrative that she was lucky to get anything. That's normal, Rachel assured her during one of their meetings. Victims of manipulation often direct anger inward. The important thing is you're taking action now. Ethan kept professional distance during this period, communicating primarily through Rachel and Patricia. Claire told herself she wasn't disappointed by his absence, that it was appropriate for him to maintain boundaries. But she found herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering the intensity in his eyes when he'd defended her to Marcus, the gentle way he'd handed her water after the confrontation. She was careful not to mistake rescue for romance. Ethan was helping her because he had his own issues with Marcus, because he believed in justice, not because he was interested in her personally. She'd learned that lesson painfully with Marcus. Men like Ethan Cole didn't end up with women like Claire Bennett outside of fairy tales. 6 weeks after their first meeting, Marcus's attorney sent a response to their formal demand letter. The offer was insulting. $100,000 lump sum, $1,900 monthly child support, no claim to any other marital assets. "He's testing us," Ethan said during an emergency meeting in his office. It was the first time Claire had seen him in person since Marcus's confrontation. "Wants to see if you'll take a marginal improvement over the original settlement." "It's double the original amount," Claire said, hating how her voice sounded hopeful. "It's still 30% of what you're legally entitled to." Ethan's tone was firm. "Don't let yourself be grateful for inadequacy, Claire. That's how Marcus wins. But if we go to court, it could take years. Emma needs things now. Which is why we're going to file an emergency motion for interim child support while the case proceeds." Ethan slid a document across his desk. "This will force Marcus to pay appropriate support starting next month, before any final settlement." Claire stared at the numbers. $2,900 monthly, backdated to the original divorce date. "This feels like too much. It's the legal minimum based on his income." Ethan's expression was patient, but unyielding. "Claire, I need you to rewire how you think about this. You're not asking for charity or favors. You're claiming what's legally yours and what Emma needs. What if the judge doesn't agree? Then I haven't done my job." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "But I will. Trust me." The hearing for interim support was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Claire spent those days in a state of low-level panic, imagining every possible disaster. What if the judge sided with Marcus? What if she came across as a gold digger? What if Emma acted up during the hearing? The night before court, unable to sleep, Claire texted Ethan at 2 a.m. "I can't do this. I'm going to freeze or say something stupid or ruin everything." His response came surprisingly quickly. "You're not going to ruin anything. You're going to tell the truth about your marriage, your daughter's needs, and Marcus's abdication of responsibility. That's all you need to do. Also, it's 2 a.m. Try to sleep. You need rest. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being judged. I'm in court regularly. Trust me, I understand performance anxiety. You're probably asleep and not even seeing these messages in real time. I'm seeing them. I'm working on another case. Insomnia is an occupational hazard." Claire hesitated, then typed, "Why are you really doing this, Ethan? And don't say it's about justice or your mother. There has to be more." The 3 dots indicating he was typing appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Finally, because watching you struggle with that formula in the store, seeing the shame on your face for something that wasn't your fault, reminded me that the law is supposed to protect people. Somewhere along the way, I'd gotten so caught up in big deals and corporate strategy that I forgot why I went to law school in the first place. You reminded me." Claire read the message 3 times, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed, "Thank you. For everything. I mean it. Get some sleep, Claire. Tomorrow we start fighting." The courtroom was less dramatic than Claire had imagined from TV shows. Just a wood-paneled room with harsh fluorescent lighting and the faint smell of old paper. Marcus sat with his attorney, a silver-haired man who radiated expensive competence. He didn't look at Claire once. Judge Patricia Morrison was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd apparently seen every custody and support battle imaginable. She reviewed the filings with brisk efficiency, then looked up at Ethan. "Mr. Cole, you're arguing that the original settlement was unconscionable and seeking interim support while the matter is relitigated. That's a bold claim. Walk me through it." Ethan stood, commanding the room with quiet authority. "Your Honor, Miss Bennett signed the settlement agreement 3 weeks postpartum, without independent legal counsel, under explicit threats from Mr. Bennett that she would receive nothing if she contested his terms. The agreement provides minimal support despite Mr. Bennett's substantial income, and fails entirely to account for marital asset division or Miss Bennett's economic sacrifices during the marriage. Your Honor, Marcus's attorney interjected smoothly. Miss Bennett accepted the settlement willingly. She was represented by her husband's attorney, who ensured the terms were fair. Her husband's attorney. Judge Morrison's eyebrow rose. You're arguing that the respondent was adequately represented by her opposing party's legal counsel? The attorney backpedaled. It was an amicable separation. Both parties agreed to use shared representation to minimize costs. There's no such thing as shared representation in divorce proceedings, counselor. You know that. The judge turned to Claire. Miss Bennett, were you informed of your right to independent legal counsel before signing this agreement? Claire stood on shaking legs. No, Your Honor. Marcus said bringing in another lawyer would make things adversarial and complicate the process. He told me he was being generous, and I should be grateful. And you signed the agreement how long after giving birth? 23 days, Your Honor. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. Mr. Bennett, you coerced a postpartum woman into signing away her legal rights without proper representation? Marcus stood, attempting his practiced charm. Your Honor, that's not how it happened. Claire was emotional and unstable after the birth. I was trying to provide stability by forcing her to sign legal documents while hormonally vulnerable and sleep-deprived. The judge's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Mr. Bennett, I've been on the bench for 22 years. I know manipulation when I see it. The hearing lasted another 90 minutes, but Claire could tell from Judge Morrison's increasingly sharp questions to Marcus's attorney that Ethan had won before they'd even started. When the judge finally ruled, her voice was crisp, with barely concealed disgust. I'm granting interim child support of $3,200 monthly, effective immediately, and backdated to the date of separation. That's $115,200 in arrears, Mr. Bennett, payable in quarterly installments. Additionally, I'm ordering a full financial disclosure from both parties within 30 days, and I'm scheduling a hearing to address the validity of the original settlement agreement. This case has all the hallmarks of unconscionable coercion, and I will not allow it to stand without thorough examination. Claire barely heard the rest. $3,200 monthly. Backdated. That was more than she'd earned in total over the past 9 months. She felt lightheaded. As they exited the courtroom, Marcus grabbed her arm. You have no idea what you've just done. You've made an enemy of me, Claire, and you're going to regret it. Remove your hand from my client. Ethan's voice was quiet but lethal. Now. Marcus released her, his face twisted with rage. This isn't over, Cole. I'll appeal. I'll drag this out for years. Please do, Ethan said mildly. Every month you delay increases your arrears and makes your eventual settlement worse. By all means, keep digging. After Marcus stormed off, Claire turned to Ethan, barely able to process what had happened. We won. We got interim relief. The real fight is still ahead. But he was smiling, genuine pleasure in his eyes. You did well in there. Honest, clear, dignified. The judge was on your side from the moment you explained the circumstances. I thought I was going to throw up. That's normal. Court is terrifying for everyone. Ethan guided her toward the exit. Listen, this is going to make Marcus angry. Very angry. I want you to be careful. Document any contact he attempts, and if he shows up at your apartment or workplace, call the police immediately. You really think he'd do something? I think Marcus is a narcissist who just experienced a significant blow to his ego in public. That makes him unpredictable. Ethan's expression was serious. Promise me you'll be cautious. I promise. Outside the courthouse, October sunshine breaking through clouds, Claire felt as if she could breathe fully for the first time in months. The money would help, certainly, but more than that, she'd been heard. Believed. Validated. "Thank you," she said to Ethan. "I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. You changed my life today. You changed your own life. I just provided the legal framework." He hesitated, then added, "There's a cafe around the corner. Do you have time for coffee? We should discuss next steps." The cafe was a small, warm space filled with the scent of espresso and fresh pastries, a stark contrast to the sterile courthouse. They claimed a corner table, and Ethan ordered for both of them, while Claire checked her phone for messages from Mrs. Chen about Emma. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, setting down a cappuccino and a chocolate croissant in front of her. "Emma's fine." Mrs. Chen sent pictures. "She's napping." Claire showed him a photo of her daughter sprawled in her playpen, mouth open, completely unconscious. "She sleeps like a starfish." Ethan's smile was genuine. "She's beautiful. She has your eyes. And Marcus's everything else, unfortunately." Claire took a sip of the cappuccino, nearly moaning at how good it tasted. Real coffee, not the instant stuff she'd been making at home to save money. God, I forgot what decent coffee tastes like. Marcus's loss is just his genetics. Personality is nurture. You're raising her, which means she'll have your kindness, your resilience, your integrity. Ethan broke off a piece of his own pastry. Those matter more than cheekbones. Claire felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "You're good at this." "At what?" "Making people feel like they matter." Ethan looked uncomfortable with the compliment. "I'm just stating facts." He pulled out his tablet, clearly eager to redirect to business. Now, about next steps. Marcus's attorney will likely file a motion to reconsider within the next few days. It's standard procedure and won't succeed, but it'll buy them time. Meanwhile, we need to prepare for the settlement hearing. That means documenting everything about your marriage, financial contributions you made, career sacrifices, the emotional abuse. The emotional abuse part is hard to prove. Not as hard as you think. We can subpoena emails, text messages, testimony from people who witnessed his treatment of you. Did anyone ever express concern about your relationship? Claire thought back. My sister, Amy. She never liked Marcus. Said he was controlling. She stopped visiting after Marcus banned her from our apartment for interfering when she suggested I keep my job after the wedding. Perfect. We'll need her testimony. Ethan made notes. Anyone else? Friends from before the marriage? I didn't really have friends by the end. Marcus said they were immature and holding me back from being the person I should be. Claire heard how this sounded. The classic isolation pattern. I didn't realize what was happening at the time. That's how it works. The erosion is gradual until you wake up one day and realize you're completely alone. Ethan's voice held an odd note. My mother went through something similar with my father. Different methods, same result. Your father isolated her? Through work. He was never physically abusive, just absent. He'd miss birthdays, anniversaries, school events because of meetings or deals. When my mother complained, he'd say she was being unsupportive of his career, that he was doing this for us. Eventually, she stopped complaining and started shrinking. Ethan's jaw tightened. By the time she got sick, she'd trained herself not to need him. She wouldn't even call him when she was in pain because she didn't want to be a burden. I'm so sorry. Claire reached across the table, covering his hand with hers before she could second-guess the gesture. That must have been awful to watch. Ethan looked at their joined hands, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. It taught me what not to do. How not to treat people who depend on you. He turned his hand over, intertwining their fingers. Claire, I need to tell you something. The sudden intensity in his voice made her nervous. Okay. I'm attracted to you. The words came out direct, unadorned. I have been since that day in the grocery store, maybe even before from seeing you around Meridian when Marcus and I were at the same firm years ago. But I'm also your attorney right now, which creates ethical complications. So I need you to know that my representation of you is completely professional. My personal feelings won't affect how I handle your case. Claire's heart hammered. You're attracted to me. Yes. The single mother who couldn't afford baby formula and was falling apart in a grocery store. The woman who survived abandonment, poverty, and systematic emotional abuse while raising a child alone and maintaining her dignity. Ethan's thumb stroked across her knuckles. That woman. Yes. Claire didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to pull her hand away, to maintain professional distance and protect herself from potential heartbreak. Another part wanted to lean into the warmth of his touch, to believe that maybe, possibly, this successful, complicated man genuinely cared about her. I don't know how to respond to that, she said finally. You don't have to respond at all. I'm just being honest because I don't believe in pretending. Ethan gently released her hand. But I also want you to know that nothing about my representation changes regardless of how you feel. Your case matters to me professionally and ethically, separate from any personal interest. What if I said I'm attracted to you too? The words escaped before Claire's caution could stop them. Ethan went very still. Are you? I think so. Maybe. I don't know. Claire laughed shakily. I'm terrible at reading my own feelings. Marcus spent years telling me I was too emotional and irrational, so now I second-guess everything. You're not irrational. You're processing trauma while trying to build a new life. That's not weakness. It's the opposite. Ethan's expression softened. Here's what I suggest. We focus on your case right now. We get you the settlement you deserve, and make sure Emma is provided for. After that, when there's no attorney-client relationship complicating things, if you're still interested, we can explore this. That could take months. I'm patient. What if I meet someone else in the meantime? Claire asked, testing. Ethan's smile was slightly crooked. Then, I'll be disappointed, but happy you found someone who makes you happy. I'm not Marcus. Claire, I don't believe in ownership or control. You're a free agent. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal filings, depositions, and the strange adjustment to having actual financial stability. The interim support payments meant Claire could afford decent childcare, which allowed her to take on more freelance work. She moved from her cramped studio to a modest 2-bedroom apartment with actual sunlight and a park nearby where she took Emma every afternoon. Marcus fought everything. He contested the backdated payments, argued that his income had been inflated in the court's calculations, and filed motion after motion to delay proceedings. His attorney used every technical maneuver available, turning what should have been a straightforward settlement negotiation into a prolonged battle. Through it all, Ethan remained constant, professional, and maddeningly appropriate. Their interactions were limited to case updates, usually delivered through Rachel. When they did meet in person, Ethan maintained careful physical distance, never touching her except for formal handshakes, never bringing up the confession he'd made in that cafe. Claire told herself she wasn't disappointed. This was the right way to handle things, keeping business and personal separate, but she found herself thinking about him at odd hours, wondering what it would be like to have coffee with him when they weren't discussing legal strategy, to see him with Emma outside the context of her being evidence in a case. 4 months after the interim support hearing, Marcus's attorney finally signaled willingness to negotiate seriously. The offer came in a formal letter: $400,000 lump sum settlement, $3,000 monthly child support until Emma turned 18, and a structured education fund that would cover college expenses. It's a good offer, Rachel told Claire during their review meeting. Not everything we'd hoped for, but substantial. It would give you real financial security. But not everything I'm entitled to, Claire said, recognizing that she'd internalized Ethan's lessons about not being grateful for inadequacy. Correct. If we go to trial, we might get more. We might also get less. Judges are unpredictable. Rachel slid another document across the table. This is Ethan's analysis of the risk factors. He wanted you to have complete information before making a decision. Claire read through Ethan's meticulous breakdown of probable outcomes, risks, and recommendations. At the bottom, in handwriting she recognized from signed documents, he'd added, "The decision is entirely yours. I'll support whatever you choose." "What does Ethan think I should do?" Claire asked. Rachel smiled slightly. "He said you'd ask that. He told me to tell you that his opinion doesn't matter. This is your life and your choice. That's not helpful." "No, but it's respectful." Rachel leaned back. "Between you and me, I think he wants you to fight for everything you deserve. But he also knows you're exhausted from months of battle, and he respects that accepting a good settlement isn't the same as giving up." Claire thought of Emma, now 13 months old, and walking unsteadily around their new apartment. She thought of her sister Amy, who'd been supportive throughout, but had gently suggested that maybe enough was enough. She thought of the stress of ongoing litigation, of facing Marcus again in court, of prolonging this fight for months, or even years more. And she thought of Ethan, who'd never once pushed her to do anything except stand up for herself. "I want to make a counteroffer," she said finally. $500,000 lump sum, $3,200 monthly support, and Marcus has to include a formal apology acknowledging his coercive behavior as part of the settlement agreement. Rachel blinked. "The apology is unusual. Courts don't usually mandate those. I don't care. I want it on record that he admits what he did." Claire's voice was steady. "He doesn't have to apologize to me personally, but I want it documented in legal filings that his behavior was wrong. I'll run it by Ethan." The counteroffer went back and forth for 3 more weeks. Marcus balked at the apology, calling it humiliating and unnecessary. His attorney argued it set a dangerous precedent. But Ethan held firm, making it clear that without the acknowledgement, the case would proceed to trial, where Marcus's behavior would be exposed in much more public and humiliating detail. Finally, grudgingly, Marcus agreed. The settlement was finalized on a cold February afternoon, 9 months after Claire had first walked into Ethan's office. She signed the papers in the same conference room where she'd confronted Marcus that first day, Rachel and Patricia witnessing the signatures. "How do you feel?" Rachel asked afterward. "Free," Claire said, surprised by the truth of it. "For the first time in years, I feel free." "Ethan wanted me to tell you congratulations. He's in Singapore for a deal this week, but he said he'd like to take you to dinner when he gets back, to celebrate the case closure." Claire's heart jumped. Did he say dinner, specifically? Rachel's smile was knowing. His exact words were, "Ask Claire if she'd have dinner with me next Friday, somewhere nice, not to discuss legal matters." "And you waited until now to mention this?" Professional ethics. Couldn't extend a personal invitation until the attorney-client relationship was formally concluded. Rachel packed up her files. "For what it's worth, I've worked with Ethan for 5 years. I've never seen him like this about anyone. Whatever's between you two, it's real." After Rachel left, Claire sat alone in the conference room, looking at the signed settlement agreement. $500,000 would change her life, give Emma opportunities Claire had only dreamed of. The monthly support meant she could go back to school if she wanted, pursue the teaching career she'd abandoned when she married Marcus. But more than the money, she had something else. Marcus's written acknowledgement that he had used undue influence and coercive tactics to pressure Miss Bennett into an inadequate settlement during a period of postpartum vulnerability. It wasn't a personal apology, but it was vindication. Proof that she hadn't been crazy or irrational or ungrateful. Proof that Marcus had been wrong. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar international number. Rachel said you agreed to dinner. I'm looking forward to it. Fair warning, I'm a terrible dancer, but an excellent listener, and I've been practicing my magic tricks for Emma. See you Friday. Friday arrived with unexpected snow, blanketing Manhattan in white that turned gray and slushy within hours. Claire changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress. Not too formal, but not casual either. Amy had insisted on watching Emma overnight, practically pushing Claire out the door with orders to actually have fun for once. Ethan picked her up at 7 in his Tesla, looking unfairly handsome in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. But his smile when he saw her was uncertain, almost nervous. You look beautiful, he said, helping her into the car with a hand at her elbow. You look nervous, Claire countered. I am nervous. Ethan pulled into traffic. This is the first actual date I've been on in 3 years. I'm out of practice. 3 years? Really? Work doesn't leave much time for relationships, and I'm... He paused, seeming to choose words carefully, selective about who I let into my life. The restaurant was a small Italian place in the West Village, intimate without being pretentious. The owner greeted Ethan by name, showing them to a corner table with candles and a view of snow falling past the window. You come here often? Claire asked, settling into her seat. When I want privacy and excellent pasta. Marco doesn't tolerate celebrity gawkers or paparazzi. Ethan poured wine for both of them. How's Emma adjusting to the new apartment? They fell into easy conversation, talking about Emma's latest attempts at words, about Claire's plans to start taking online courses in education, about Ethan's deal in Singapore that had apparently fallen apart spectacularly due to cultural misunderstandings. You don't seem upset about losing the deal, Claire observed over their main courses. I'm not. Sometimes failures teach you more than successes. Ethan twirled pasta on his fork. That deal would have made me $50 million, but it would have required compromising on labor standards I'm not willing to negotiate. So, not really a loss. Most people wouldn't walk away from $50 million. Most people don't have enough money already. His tone was matter-of-fact, not boastful. Once you hit a certain threshold, additional wealth is just numbers on a screen. What matters is whether you're using your resources in ways that align with your values. Claire thought of Marcus, who'd fought viciously over every dollar of support, despite having substantially more than he needed. That's not how most wealthy people think. No, but maybe it should be. Ethan met her eyes. Claire, I need to tell you something about that day in the grocery store. Her heart rate picked up. Okay, it wasn't coincidence. I mean, running into you was coincidental, but I was there because I'd been following your situation for a while. He held up a hand as she started to speak. Not stalking. Let me explain. I have a foundation that provides legal assistance to people escaping abusive relationships. One of our caseworkers had flagged your divorce filing because of the inadequate settlement and Marcus's name. She brought it to my attention, thinking we might want to offer pro bono support. Claire felt dizzy. So you knew who I was before the formula incident. I knew your name and case details. I didn't know you. When I saw you at that customer service counter, trying so hard to maintain your dignity while that clerk dismissed you, I saw someone who'd been systematically taught to expect less than she deserved. It made me angry. Ethan's voice softened. And then you turned around and you were real, not just a case file. You were a person fighting to survive with grace and determination, and I wanted to help. Not as a lawyer initially, just as a human being who saw another human being struggling. But you didn't tell me any of this. Because I wanted you to have agency. If I'd approached you as a lawyer offering services, you might have felt pressured or pitied. I wanted you to make the choice to seek help. He looked uncomfortable. In retrospect, maybe I should have been more upfront. I'm sorry if the deception feels manipulative. Claire processed this, turning the revelation over in her mind. Part of her wanted to be angry at the manipulation, even if well-intentioned, but another part understood why he'd done it. My foundation helps about 200 people a year escape bad situations, Ethan continued. Most of them I never meet personally. The caseworkers handle everything. But with you, he trailed off, struggling with words. I wanted to be involved. Not because of Marcus, though I won't pretend that wasn't satisfying. Because of you. Because from the moment I met you, I wanted to know you better. That's a lot to take in, Claire said quietly. I know, and if it's too much, if you want to finish dinner and go home and never see me again, outside of casual encounters, I'll respect that. Ethan's expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. But I hope you won't, because these past 9 months of maintaining professional distance have been torture. I want to know you, Claire, not as a client or a case, but as a person. The snow fell heavier outside the window, blanketing the city in soft white. Claire thought of the past 9 months, of Ethan's unwavering support, his respect for her choices, the way he'd never once made her feel small or incapable. I want to know you too, she said finally. But I'm scared. Marcus broke something in me. I don't trust easily anymore. I'm not asking for trust immediately. I'm asking for a chance. Ethan reached across the table, offering his hand palm up, letting her decide whether to take it. A chance to show you that not all men are Marcus. That some of us actually mean what we say. Claire looked at his offered hand, at the sincerity in his eyes, at the vulnerability in his posture. Then, deciding to be brave, she placed her hand in his. Okay, she said, a chance. But I need you to understand something. Emma comes first. Always. If at any point you decide that being with a single mother is too complicated, Emma is part of who you are. I wouldn't want you without her. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. I like your daughter, Claire. She's funny and brave and surprisingly good at card tricks for a toddler. Over the next 3 months, Ethan became a fixture in Claire and Emma's life, but so gradually that Claire barely noticed the transition. He'd show up on Sunday mornings with bagels and offer to watch Emma while Claire took a long bath. He'd text her articles he thought she'd find interesting about education reform. He'd introduced her to colleagues in his network who helped her navigate enrolling in an online master's program. With Emma, he was patient and genuinely engaged, not performing fatherhood, but actually enjoying her company. He taught her increasingly complex magic tricks, read her the same picture books 12 times without complaint, and once spent an entire afternoon building an elaborate blanket fort in Claire's living room because Emma had declared herself a princess wizard who needed a castle. You're good with her, Claire observed one evening after Emma had finally fallen asleep following a marathon fort-dwelling session. Ethan emerged from Emma's bedroom, hair mussed and tie long abandoned. She's easy to be good with. She inherited your resilience and joy. She's also inherited my stubborn streak. Good luck when she hits terrible 2s in a few months. I look forward to it. Ethan collapsed onto Claire's second-hand couch, pulling her against his side with comfortable familiarity. They'd been taking things slowly, stolen kisses and careful affection, both of them wary of rushing into something neither could afford to get wrong. Can I ask you something? Claire settled into his warmth. Always. What happened with your last relationship? You said it's been 3 years since you dated anyone seriously. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his fingers absently stroking her arm. Her name was Jennifer. She was a lobbyist, smart, ambitious, understood the demands of my work because hers was similar. We dated for 2 years, and I thought we were building towards something permanent. What changed? I asked her to marry me. She said yes. Then 3 weeks later, she sat me down and explained that she'd been thinking about our future, and she didn't want children. Ever. She'd assumed I didn't either, because I'd never mentioned wanting kids. Claire lifted her head to look at him. But you do want children. I did. I do. I don't know. Ethan's expression was complicated. I thought I did. My mother had wanted grandchildren badly. After she died, I felt like I owed it to her memory. But Jennifer was right that I'd never articulated it as a priority. We'd never discussed it explicitly. So what happened? We tried to compromise. She suggested maybe adoption, older kids who needed homes. I said I'd be open to not having children if that was the deal breaker. We went in circles for weeks, both of us trying to be reasonable and accommodating. Ethan sighed. Then one night she told me she could see me resenting her in 20 years for denying me fatherhood. And I realized she was right. I would resent her. Not consciously or deliberately, but it would be there. So you ended it. She did, actually. Said she loved me too much to trap me in a childless marriage I didn't really want. She's married now, to another lobbyist who never wanted kids either. They seem happy. Claire absorbed this, understanding the weight of that loss. Do you regret it? No. It was the right call for both of us. Ethan pulled her closer, though I will say, watching you with Emma has clarified things I didn't fully understand before. Fatherhood isn't about biological obligation or societal expectations. It's about showing up, being present, choosing every day to be there for a child who needs you. That's a very specific revelation. I'm around your daughter frequently. It's made me think about what kind of father I'd want to be, if I ever had the opportunity. He hesitated. Claire, I know we're taking things slow. I know you need time to trust this. But I want you to know that I'm serious about you. About both of you. This isn't casual for me. Claire's throat tightened. It's not casual for me either. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. Emma's father is completely absent. If you become part of her life and then leave, it'll break her heart. I can't let that happen. I'm not going to leave. Ethan tilted her chin up, his eyes intense. I can't predict the future, but I can promise you that I don't do anything halfway. When I commit completely. And I'm committed to this, to you and Emma, for as long as you'll have me. The kiss that followed was different from their previous careful explorations, deeper, more certain, carrying the weight of promises neither of them spoke aloud. Later that night, after Ethan had left with plans to see them Sunday, Claire found herself staring at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her toddler bed. Her daughter looked so much like Marcus that sometimes it hurt, but her personality was all her own, fierce and joyful and determinedly independent. Your mom's falling in love, Claire whispered to her sleeping child, with someone who's kind and patient and actually shows up, someone who sees you as a person, not an obligation. I think you'd approve. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan, forgot to mention. I have a work conference in Boston next weekend. Would you and Emma want to come? There's a great children's museum there, and I'd like you to meet my sister Catherine. No pressure, but I wanted to invite you. Claire's heart swelled. Meeting family was a significant step, an acknowledgement that this relationship was moving beyond the tentative exploration phase into something real and lasting. She typed back, we'd love to come. Fair warning though, Emma's in a phase where she insists on wearing her princess wizard costume everywhere. Your sister, is going to think we're very strange. My sister's an ER doctor who collects taxidermied animals. We'll fit right in. Also, I want pictures of this princess wizard costume." Claire laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Maybe, possibly, this could actually work. Maybe not all men were Marcus. Maybe some of them were Ethan. Complicated and sincere, and willing to show up not just for her, but for the daughter who desperately needed stable, caring adults in her life. The Boston trip became a turning point. Catherine Cole turned out to be as brilliant and eccentric as advertised, immediately bonding with Emma over their shared love of weird animals and teaching her elaborate medical terminology that a 14-month-old absolutely didn't need to know. Over dinner at Catherine's brownstone, surrounded by her questionable taxidermy collection, she pulled Claire aside. "My brother's different with you," Catherine said bluntly. "Happier, more human. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm not doing anything except being myself." "Exactly." Catherine smiled. Ethan spends so much time being the brilliant CEO, the successful investor, the guy with all the answers. You let him just be Ethan. That's rarer than you think. 6 months later, on a warm September afternoon, Ethan proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or elaborately planned event, but in Claire's living room after Emma had dumped an entire box of crackers on his head while making it rain snacks. He was covered in crumbs, laughing, when he suddenly went quiet and said, "Marry me." Claire, holding Emma, who was giggling maniacally at the cracker chaos, stared at him. "What?" "Marry me," Ethan repeated, more certain. "I don't have a ring yet because this wasn't planned, but I don't want to wait another moment to ask. I love you. I love Emma. I want to build a life with both of you officially and permanently. You're covered in crackers. I'm aware. Is that a no?" Claire looked at this man who'd walked into her life in a grocery store, who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd learned her daughter's favorite songs and medical history, and the exact way she liked her sippy cup filled. Who showed up, day after day, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. "It's a yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It's absolutely a yes." Emma, not understanding the significance but picking up on the emotion, clapped her cracker-covered hands and declared, "Yes, yes, yes." They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the same venue where they'd pretended to be married that first night, the wedding that had started everything. This time, though, it was real. Emma was the flower girl, taking her role so seriously that she forgot to actually scatter petals and instead handed each one individually to guests with solemn explanations about princess wizard magic. Marcus had sent a terse congratulations via his attorney, along with a formal notice that he was relinquishing all parental rights to Emma. "He's getting remarried to Stephanie," Ethan explained gently when Claire read the letter. "Apparently they want a fresh start without complications from his previous relationships." Claire had expected to feel hurt or angry, but instead she felt relief. Emma deserves better than someone who sees her as a complication. She does. And now she'll have better. 2 weeks after the wedding, Ethan formally filed to adopt Emma. The process took 4 months, but on a cold February morning, almost exactly 2 years after Claire had tried to return baby formula in a grocery store, a judge declared Emma Walsh Bennett Cole legally Ethan's daughter. Emma, now 2.5, sat on Ethan's lap in the courtroom and asked the judge, "Does this mean Daddy's my daddy for real forever?" "For real forever," the judge confirmed, tears in her eyes. "Good," Emma declared. "He's the best at magic." Life settled into a rhythm that still sometimes surprised Claire with its stability and joy. She completed her master's degree in education and accepted a position at a progressive private school that offered free tuition to faculty children, Ethan's venture capital firm continued to grow, but he'd restructured his schedule to prioritize dinners at home and weekends with his family. They had a second daughter, Sophia, 18 months after the adoption. She had Claire's green eyes and Ethan's dark hair, and Emma declared herself the best big sister in the universe with such conviction that no one argued. 5 years after that first meeting, Claire stood in the grocery store where it had all begun, this time with money in her bank account and 2 daughters in the shopping cart. She was picking up formula, not because she couldn't afford it, but because Sophia had a preference for a specific brand. "Excuse me," a woman's voice came from behind her. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I couldn't help overhearing you're returning this formula. Is there something wrong with it?" Claire turned to find a young woman, probably early 20s, with tired eyes and a baby carrier strapped to her chest. She looked exhausted and overwhelmed and desperately worried. "Oh no, I'm not returning it. I'm buying it." Claire saw herself in this woman, recognized the particular desperation of new motherhood without adequate support. "Are you okay?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I'm fine. I miscalculated which formula my daughter needs, and I already returned 1 container today, and they won't let me exchange this one, and I don't get paid until Friday, and she needs to eat." "Hey," Claire said gently, putting a hand on the woman's arm. "Take a breath. What's your daughter's name?" "Riley. She's 3 months old. Riley is beautiful. What formula does she need?" 10 minutes later, Claire had not only purchased the correct formula for Riley, but also gotten the woman's phone number and email address. "There's an organization that helps parents in difficult situations," Claire explained, thinking of Ethan's foundation, which she now helped run. "They provide legal support, financial assistance, childcare resources. Would you be interested in hearing more about it?" The woman, whose name was Jessica, nodded tearfully. "I'm going through a divorce. My husband, he said I trapped him with the pregnancy." Claire squeezed her hand. "I know that story. I lived that story. And I'm here to tell you it gets better. You're going to be okay." That evening, over dinner with Ethan and the girls, Claire told him about the encounter. "I gave her our foundation's information. I hope that's okay." Ethan, helping Emma cut her chicken while simultaneously preventing Sophia from launching pasta across the kitchen, smiled at her. "It's more than okay. It's perfect. I keep thinking about how different my life could have been if you hadn't been there that day in the store. You would have been fine. You're strong, Claire. You always were." "Maybe, but I wouldn't have been this." She gestured around their kitchen, at the controlled chaos of family dinner, at the evidence of a life built on mutual support and genuine love. "This is better than fine. This is extraordinary." Later, after the girls were asleep and they sat together on the couch reviewing foundation applications, Ethan pulled Claire close. "Thank you. For what?" "For giving me a chance. For trusting me with your heart and with Emma. For building this life with me." Claire kissed him softly. "Thank you for showing up that day. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Always," Ethan murmured against her lips. "For as long as we both shall live." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the city in white. Inside, warm and safe and surrounded by family, Claire thought about the woman in the grocery store, about Jessica and Riley, and all the other people struggling to survive circumstances they hadn't chosen. Tomorrow, she'd make sure Jessica got connected with resources. Tonight, she'd be grateful for second chances, for grocery store encounters, and for billionaires who knew how to do magic tricks. Her daughter, it turned out, had been right all along. Ethan was the best at magic. The kind that mattered most. The everyday magic of showing up, being present, and transforming ordinary moments into something extraordinary. And they all lived happily, messily, beautifully, ever after.